It is Sunday, the 20th of March, 2016. I'm in front of the Unitarian Church of Montreal here, engaged in my alternative spiritual practice of protesting against Unitarian Universalist injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy. And we're looking at the wayside pulpit, which has a couple of things about the truth and reconciliation process for Canada's First Nations. So in French it says here, le chemin que nous parcourons revêt autant d'importance que la destination que nous cherchons à atteindre. Il n'y a pas de raccourci lorsqu'il s'agit de vérité et de réconciliation. Nous devons parcourir toute la distance. So in English it's saying, the path that we are on or we are taking has as much importance as the destination that we seek to attain or reach. There are no shortcuts. When it comes to truth and reconciliation, we must go the whole distance. And I find this remarkably hypocritical in that Montreal Unitarians have made zero effort, and I do mean zero effort, to enter into a truth and reconciliation protest in terms of my own grievances against the church. On numerous occasions I've offered the leadership of the Unitarian Church of Montreal the possibility of entering into dialogue and trying to resolve the dispute. But no, they always refuse. And getting back to misuse of the criminal code, when Reverend Diane Rollert became the new minister of the church, knowing that she had almost certainly been lied to by church leaders about my protest and so on, I sent her an email or two, essentially saying to her, you've probably heard, an inaccurate version of events from the church leaders. I think you would do well to enter into dialogue with me so you can hear my side of the story, towards the aim of resolving this dispute. Because, prior to the arrival of Reverend Diane Rollert, nobody had done anything to try to resolve the dispute. There was an interim minister, as there always is between two ministers. That interim minister was Reverend Peter Bellotta. I tried to engage in dialogue with him. He initially bluntly refused, and then almost immediately changed his mind, like within hours, or at most, it was within hours, because I basically saw him at an event at Concordia University and said we should talk. He said, I've got nothing to say to you, kind of thing. And I went back a little bit later and went into a bit more detail with him, and he actually came around and agreed that it would be a good idea to enter into dialogue and try to resolve things before the new minister came in. But then he dropped the ball. It's possible, maybe even probable, that he expressed some interest in doing this with the lay leaders of the church, and they said, oh, no, you're not talking to Robin Edgar, and basically forbade him from doing that. That's a possibility. But I really don't know, because Peter never talked to me, so I have no idea what caused him to drop the ball on entering into dialogue towards the end of resolving the dispute. But in any case, getting back to Reverend Rollert, I invited her to enter into dialogue with me. And in my invitation to enter into dialogue, I did say, there are some actions I haven't taken yet that I'm, holding in reserve. When I learned that Reverend Ray Drennan was retiring, in quotation marks, because he basically ran away. He basically quit and got out of the church as a result of the problems he caused, and I'm sure not just the problems he caused in terms of me, but I suspect a few other ones. So anyway, I just said, there's some actions I have held and reserved. If you don't enter into dialogue with me, I may take these, some of these actions. Basically, just trying to say to her, it'd be really better if you spoke with me than if I, had to, escalate the protest somewhat. Well, Reverend Diane Rollert pretended that this was a threat against her personal safety, which it could not possibly be, because I'm clearly talking about actions that I'd already considered taking well before she even came into the picture. I'm talking about actions held in reserve. These were actions that I considered taking even before I knew there was going to be a new minister, for the church. So it couldn't possibly be any kind of threat against her. But nonetheless, she pretended that this was a threat against her. And I think it was just a pretext for her to, find some way to try and, go to the police and get some criminal bullshit thing going on there. Because the Unitarian Church knows that if they can have me convicted of a crime, well, then at that point, they can force an end to my protest. If nothing else, I might be in jail. You can't really protest in front of the church if you're in jail, can you? But even without that, essentially what happens is if a person is convicted of a crime in the course of protesting, well, then they can be subject to a peace order, which prevents them from engaging in a protest for a year or whatever, and the church has known this for a long time, long before Reverend Diane Rollert came into the picture. So I think she decided to try to exercise that option again, and she basically rounded up several other church members. They all signed depositions about how terribly frightened of me they were. And so she sought a restraining order against me on the basis that I'd allegedly made threats against her personal safety and that she was very, very, very frightened of me. I mean, if you read her depositions, it's all about how terribly frightened of me she is. I contested this, of course, but unfortunately I got one of the worst judges in Quebec presiding over the hearings, one Roland Matt, I don't mind naming her. When I spoke with various Quebec lawyers about the fact that Roland Matt had presided over this hearing, their eyes immediately roll and they go, oh God, not her, kind of thing. So I got a pretty bad judge, and that judge did a pretty bad job. She prevented me from properly cross-examining Reverend Diane Rollert in a way that would have exposed outright lies that she'd told in her testimony. Reverend Diane Rollert told at least 2 lies, outright lies, provable lies that I could easily have proven, which would have discredited her testimony. But Judge Roland Matt refused to allow me to properly cross-examine the witness. And so, in the end, Roland Matt gave the restraining order. Now, the thing is, the restraining order is good for a period of 1 year. In the church's mind, it's very, very clear that they believed that once they got this restraining order, that would be game over permanently. In their mind, they believed that even though the initial period was for 1 year, that they could just keep rolling it over. They could just keep, I don't know exactly what they're thinking, because I can't read their minds, obviously, but it's very, very clear from what they said that they believed that was putting a permanent end to my protest. That is certainly what they were seeking to do. And again, it's clear from what they said when I came back, because I in quotation marks, respected the restraining order, took a 1-year holiday from protesting, and once the restraining order expired, well, I resumed my protest. In fact, when I walked out of the courtroom after the restraining order had been granted on the basis of what I consider to be paranoid fantasies and perjurious lies, I said thanks for the holiday. So walking out, say thanks for the holiday. And that's exactly what I did. I took a nice 1-year break from protesting that was imposed on me by Reverend Diane Rollert and a few other liars from the Unitarian Church of Montreal, including Gazette Justice reporter Sue Montgomery. She wasn't an actual witness, but she signed one of the depositions, claiming to be terribly frightened of me and all this bullshit. So, in any case, I came back 1 year after the restraining order had been granted. It was ended, and I came back literally the first Sunday after it ended that I could. And what happens? Reverend Diane Rollert, this minister who claimed to be terribly, terribly frightened of me in order to get the restraining order, walks out of church, walks to within 3 feet of me, and tells me I have no right to be there. And I'm going, well, no, actually I do. You got a restraining order for 1 year, it's over, I'm back. But the point I'm trying to make here is this woman who claimed to be deathly afraid of me, good day, sir, did not send out someone else to talk to me because she was like so frightened, that she was afraid to even speak to me. No, she walked to within 3 feet of me and told me to my face that I had no right to be there. Doesn't sound like the actions of a woman who's really very frightened of me, which just goes to underline that I think in Reverend Diane Roller's case, it's not so much paranoia as perjury. I don't mind saying that, outright lies. She just basically lied about being frightened of me so she could obtain the restraining order that would prevent me from protesting. And in her mind, and in other church leaders' mind, this would be a permanent end to my protest, as witnessed by the fact that when the initial restraining order ended and I resumed my protest, she walked out of church and said I have no right to be there. And other church leaders, presidents of the board and so on, said the same kind of thing. Once I resumed my protest, they kept saying, oh, you're not supposed to be here. Kept calling the police. So like 2010, 2011, 2012, there was numerous interactions with the police, various attempts to intimidate me into ending the protest. I basically challenged all of the various, police intimidation. They even took a SPVM police detective who had abused his authority to the Police Ethics Commission, and they agreed with me that he was in fact guilty of intimidation and harassment. I continued my protest, and here we are today. It's the 20th of March of 2016, and we're still protesting, and it's all, I won't say all, but it's certainly largely because the leadership of the church do not live up to their own words. Well, these aren't their words, but they're putting these words of other people out there, trying to, this is like they're saying this is our view kind of thing. So let's read it. Reconciliation will not be one grand finite act. It will be a multitude of small acts and gestures played out between individuals, and it will be ongoing until all the wounds are healed. Well, it's kind of funny because what is actually happening, and has happened for a long time, is there's a whole multitude of small acts and gestures played out between individuals that have been ongoing for decades, where the Unitarian Universalists make a total mockery of those words. There's a whole bunch of acts and gestures that involve intimidation, harassment, false accusations, slanderous and libelous lies, a few physical assaults, lots of false complaints to the police. So the exact opposite of seeking reconciliation, the exact opposite of trying to find out the truth. No, they're doing everything they can to bury the truth, hide the truth, and refuse, any kind of process that would lead to truth and reconciliation. They don't want to know the truth, and they don't want to reconcile. They haven't made the slightest effort. On the other hand, I've made numerous efforts to try and resolve the situation, given them lots of ways in which they can resolve things, or at least go a long way to resolving things, and of course they always refuse. When I say, well, if you just retract and apologize, basically, we will be largely settled here. In fact, recently, Sue Montgomery, the Gazette Justice reporter, just over a year ago, in December of 2015, she accused me of libeling her because I was accusing her of being complicit in Unitarian Universalist cover-up and denial of clergy sexual misconduct, which she is. There's no question that Sue Montgomery, in trying to shut down my protest in front of the church, which in part is a protest against Unitarian Universalist clergy sexual misconduct, is guilty of complicity in those cover-up efforts. She's actively involved in cover-up efforts. She's actively involved in trying to hide from the public that the Unitarian Church of Montreal